All right, welcome everyone. So this week we are going to take a look at one of the most common and most important classes of functions that you'll ever encounter in not only in Algebra 2, but in higher math as well, and that's a polynomial function. Now, we've already dealt with some types of polynomial functions, but we haven't really looked at it in general. What is a polynomial function is the first question. So a polynomial function is something like this. A polynomial function, as you can see, is a function that's comprised of powers of x, essentially integral powers of x, so whole number powers of x. So like this polynomial here, p of x is 5x to the 7th minus 3x to the 4th plus 19x squared plus x minus 14. This is a polynomial function because it's comprised of powers of x, integer powers of x. Now, let's start by talking about some of the vocabulary that you're going to need to know when we talk about polynomial functions. So first of all, notice that this polynomial function is comprised of pieces that are added or subtracted together, okay, which are called terms. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. So the pieces that are added or subtracted together to make up a polynomial are its terms. And so we would say that this polynomial has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. It's a 5-term polynomial. So a term is essentially each piece that's added or subtracted together to make up the polynomial. So 5x to the 7th is a term of this polynomial. 19x squared is a term of this polynomial. Even this constant, negative 14, is a term of this polynomial. Okay, so a polynomial is made up of different terms or pieces that are added or subtracted together. All right, now let's take a look at each of the terms because there's some vocabulary when we look at each of those. Okay, so here's an example. So this is the first term of the polynomial, 5x to the 7th. Okay, so there are two pieces to this term that you need to know about, two pieces of vocabulary. One is the coefficient. The coefficient, that's the number in front multiplying the term. So 5, we would say, is the coefficient of this term. The other is the so-called degree. So the degree is the power of the x. So we would say that the degree of this term is 7th. This is a 7th degree term, we would say. Okay, so coefficient is the number in front multiplying, and the degree is the power of x. Okay, now, last but not least, we often talk about also the degree of the polynomial. So when you talk about p of x, and I ask you, well, what's the degree of p of x? Okay, well, the degree of the polynomial is the highest degree of any term of your polynomial. So you look at all the degrees of all your terms, basically the powers of x. What's the biggest power of x? Well, that's 7. So we would say that p of x is a 7th degree polynomial, or has degree 7. Okay, so vocabulary, again, the terms are the pieces that make up the polynomial. Within each term, you have a coefficient, which is a number multiplying in front, the factor multiplying in front, and the degree is the power of x for that term. The degree of the entire polynomial is the highest power of x, so the highest degree of any term. So in this case, it would be 7. Okay, now polynomials are really important. They model a lot of interesting and important behavior in the real world. And so one of the things that we want to start to take a look at are what are the features of these functions. And to start to take a look at that, let's first start talking about, well, what are the features of the graphs of these functions? Because that's the most intuitive place to start, is looking at a picture. So when we see a picture of a polynomial, a graph, what do we see? What are the important features? And then we can start to talk about how can we find and how can we analyze those features. Okay, so let's take a look at some graphs next.